Sega of the 90s, the Sega that we remember, would probably be the company that is run by its creators and its artists rather than its business people, right? Reality was that they had to change, and they did change, and they've continued to change, but they've, by virtue of changing and cleaning up maybe the business side of things, that, that artistry that led isn't leading anymore, so it's maybe secondary or tertiary, right? So, that's the reality of it. But that's, when I think back to what made Sega so special back then, at least for me, I mean, yes, they were leading edge, usually in the arcades. They were, ahead of the curve, if not, at least tied with Namco or whoever. And their games were flashy, exciting, and simple. Like, if you think about games today, right? Like, I mean, folks playing, very casual games on mobile phones or whatever, things that have, one button or whatever, or require, relatively simple. I mean, if you think about it, Sega's games back then were also just as simple to get into. You could pick them up and play and have a good time right away. And yes, sometimes you'd have to spend time to master certain games, right, to get, really good at them. But just generally speaking, they were easy to get into. So, yeah, and I'm not sure that that's the case anymore.
Welcome back to the Next Level Sega fans, with the show that remembers when games came complete, when arcades were open, and when Sega made consoles. I'm Dan the Mega Driver, and I'm joined not only by my friend and co-host James the Segaholic. Say hi, James.
Hello.
Well, we have two more Sega guys. Should that be Sega Saturn guys? Yes. From the Shiro Group, it's Dave and Peter. Guys, thank you so much for coming on. How are you doing?
Doing good.
I
thought we were already recording.
Yeah, sorry.
It's okay. You can put all that other stuff in the outtakes.
We will. Sorry, it was recording so that we don't forget later on.
Yes.
What just happened before.
Yeah. No worries.
Then we started proper. Sorry about that.
We're Sega guys. We're primarily Saturn. It's true, but I love a good Sega console, regardless of what it is. Right.
Yeah.
Save maybe the I don't know. I never had a Nomad. I wouldn't mind having one, but I think it was completely unnecessary. People are gonna slay me for that, but
I never had one either. It never came out over here.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Okay.
I never got it.
Never had an SG 1000 or Mark II or Pico Beaner either. So there.
But everybody right here in this room, our favorite console is the Saturn, right?
That's right.
Right? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, this is going to be fun. Yeah.
So how you guys been doing? What have you been playing recently?
You go first, Peter.
Do you know, I mean, I've got such a backlog of even just Saturn stuff. So despite having played hundreds and hundreds of Saturn games, I'm sure, I'm trying to make my way through some of the recent translations. A lot of the recent fan translations have been RPGs and what have you, and that takes time to get through. Time is at a bit of a premium. So the one I'm working through right now is Valholian. It's that, it's a strategy RPG game. It was translated, I think I want to say last year. It could even be 2 years ago now. But yeah, it's kind of fun. I'm on chapter 3 out of I'm not sure even how many, so I'm kind of really getting into it. It's pretty fun. It's a quick game, difficult, very difficult, but really enjoying myself with it. So yeah.
Now that's kind of like plays out overhead like Fire Emblem, right? But then the battles are like 3D, creamy 3D graphics.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You could actually turn the creaminess off and just watch the overhead,
Okay.
You'll see the little hit points or whatever. But yeah, the default setting is that, when there's an attack, you will see it in, that sort of full 3D, and it looks decent. It's a 1998 game, so yeah, not bad.
Not quite Shining Force 3 quality, but still good. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's getting there. I mean, Shining Force 3, those guys were the masters, right? So
that's cool. I want to try Vandal Hearts, which is another V translation. But Nick was putting some footage together for PRGE, and he was like, "This game is sick. I got to spend more time with this game." it's a Konami kind of isometric strategy platformer, or not platform, but strategy RPG. Lots of like blood, and I know the artist looks a lot like the art looks a lot like Treasure Games for some, but it's a Konami game. I don't know, maybe it's the same artist. I'm not sure, but looks like a really cool game, and it's translated, so that'll be one that I want to try. But
yeah, I've played Vandal Hearts before. I played it played it on release on that other console, that other 32-bit console that show up
yes,
yeah. And it's a fantastic tactical RPG. Not quite at the level of Shining Force 3, but in a very similar vein. It's and yeah, you know, we were teenagers when we played it, so it's like, oh, look at all the blood, that's fantastic.
Yeah. We did so we did a panel at PRGE all about the translations and homebrew. And as we were doing the panel, like, we didn't really think about this until we were delivering the presentation. We were like, you know, now that we come to think about it, a lot of these games that have been translated are strategy RPGs. A lot of isometric, a lot of top-down, Soccer Wars, Vandal Hearts, Valhallian, you name it.
Tactics Ogre, I think.
And yeah, Tactics Ogre, Ogre Battle. These are the games they didn't think we wanted back then, basically. That's the conclusion I came to, is like, okay, so these are all the games they held back and didn't release in the West. They didn't think Americans were interested in strategy RPGs, because now the floodgates are open and we're getting a ton of them, you know, like because of the fans, you know, so that's crazy. But yeah, no, lots of good games. I've been in the end game of Tears of the Kingdom, and I just refuse to beat it. I just
dying on Tears of the Kingdom.
So I've just been like completing all my side quests, doing a bunch of engineering, you know, Korok space program, that kind of stuff. You know, I just been having fun with the just the building system and stuff like that. That's been a lot of fun. Love Tears of the Kingdom. Think it's definitely got a shot for game of the year. So it's an excellent game.
It is.
I also loved Breath of the Wild, though, you know, for the record. But I think Tears of the Kingdom is maybe a little better. I just don't like how it kind of like almost reboots, and it just doesn't acknowledge a lot of the stuff that happened in Breath of the Wild. It's kind of like, okay, why isn't anybody talking about this? You know, so I don't know. That was kind of interesting, but. So playing that, and then I just picked up No Man's Sky on the Switch, and that I'm late to the game or to the party, whatever, but it seems really cool. So yeah, I just started playing it, and Jesse was like, "This is neat," you know. So that and Genesis Mini, we've been playing a bunch of Genesis stuff. So
awesome. No, I'm 95 hours into Tears of the Kingdom, and I'm kind of past the point that you are. I've just got Ganon to beat, but I've got plenty of hearts, done about 100 shrines. I've unlocked all the fairies and trying to upgrade my armor, but it just feels like a slog now. I just want it to end.
You're at the end. For me,
it to be over.
That's all I got to do is go. I could just go beat Ganon, but instead I'm like getting all the armor. I'm obsessing over. I gotta get the Ocarina of Time armor. I gotta get the Wind Waker armor. You know, all that stuff. You know, so.
I've got all that, but yeah, no, I've been playing that. I've been playing. It's funny talking about translations. Actually, playing Grandia. I'm still trying to work my way through that. I'm 50 hours into that.
Oh wow,
which has been fun.
Excellent game.
And then I've been watching the Beckham documentary on Netflix.
Okay,
and that got me playing FIFA 98 on the Sega Saturn.
Okay. I'm gonna put you on the spot. So I think I asked you this before, but which is the like reigning champion soccer game on the Saturn? Is it 97 World Soccer 97?
97 for me, but you know what, the France 98. No, 98-7 for definite, but I think the World Cup 98 game comes very close. Yeah. Road to Win, I think it's called. And you have this qualifying mode in it, which is fantastic.
Was that PAL only or
Europe only? That was Japanese only.
Japan only.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A licensed World Cup game that only came out in Japan. I mean,
it was licensed?
Yeah,
it
came
out only in
Japan.
Now, has anybody like translated the rosters or anything like that, or translated
it? Not as far as I know. I mean, there's plenty of mods for Worldwide Soccer 98.
Yeah, there's a modern day mod of that brings all the kind of modern day squads in as well.
Okay. But I wonder if there's any interest in doing something like that. That'd be interesting.
It would be. The thing about it is very Japan-centric. So when you do the qualifying mode, the only team that you can play as is Japan.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, I mean, when you qualify, the commentator goes absolutely berserk. It's like Nippon, Nippon, Nippon. And it's like,
that's funny.
But yeah, that's great. What about
They got
yourself?
all the best stuff.
Oh, they did.
Yeah,
What
no,
about-
I mean, I would have to say like worldwide. See, that's the thing is I'm not a, any kind of official on soccer. So, my kid plays and he really loves the sport. And so I've gotten a lot into it. He had an undefeated season last year with his team. This year, the difficulties ramped up and they've lost. They've lost 2 matches, but they've won a bunch. And so they're starting to go up against really hard teams, But he's like a defender and he's got like a cannon for a foot and he's kicked a couple goals from like full field, like from all the way down the field. Like that's his thing is he's not about finesse, he's just like if he hits it and the field is open, he just kicks it.
Sounds like he would do really, really well in Scottish football because that's just what we do, just kick it and run.
And he loves to punt it as high up in the air as he can.
I definitely do well in Scottish football, mate. That's it.
But yeah, and he loves to do like headers and stuff like that. Yeah, he's so I've gotten into the sport.
Get Dave's number to the Scottish national team here, people.
Peter did this wonderful article. It was like a shootout of all of the hockey games, because Peter's from Canada. He knows a thing or two about hockey, and he was able to give us this like really good breakdown of like where all the hockey games on Saturn fall. And so I had that same interest in soccer games. So I'm really going to have to check out that Japanese one. What was it? World Cup 98.
Yeah, World Cup 98, road to win.
Road to win. Okay, yeah. See, that's not on my radar. But it is now, so that's good. So.
Yeah, it plays fantastic, absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
And James, what about yourself, mate? What have you been playing?
Well, I've ended up playing more Panzer Dragoon Saga than I thought I would because I've been capturing Panzer Dragoon footage for obviously the pod, which will have went out before this actually airs. But I have been recording footage for that, and my current save, I was on like disc 2, so I was running about, yourself trying to get the ship parts for Payet, which he doesn't actually want whenever he realizes you've got a dragon. So you finally, you get captured, and then Gash saves you, gives you the parts, whatnot. But it turned out that I just ended up sitting playing disc 2, even though I'd captured all the footage that I needed for that part of the video. It's like I'll just keep playing, I'll just keep going. It's just so good.
Such a great game. I mean, if it wasn't for that
Beautiful.
price, people wouldn't crucify it the way they do. People are just jealous because they're never going to own a copy, and so they're like, it's not that good. No, it really is.
No, we said that on the pod as well, Dan. Is that I think that there's 3 distinct groups when it comes to Saga. There's people who had it back in the day and remember it getting disc 1 on Sega Saturn magazine, pre-ordering it, having it, whenever it was just a normal release. Then there's the people who got it a little bit after, while it was still affordable, who wanted it back in the day but didn't manage to get it, but it was still affordable. Then you've got the third group, which is the collectors, who don't see it as this wonderful, easily playable, brilliant battle mechanic RPG. They see it as a rare commodity. So they turn it on thinking, I'm going to play a £700 game. And that's not the way to approach it. And I think if you go into Saga with that mindset, you are going to be disappointed because no game is worth 700 quid. So but if you've got that kind of hook from back then, that kind of whole time, whenever you've seen the previews and Sega Saturn magazine, and as I said, getting that disc on the cover, like the full first disc on the cover of a magazine for free, like it was just crazy. So, aye.
You know what I love about Saga is that if you had just a bucket of RPGs and you reached in, you grabbed one, chances are quite a few of them, whatever you grab, it's going to be similar to a lot of the other stuff in there. But you grab Saga, there's nothing like it.
No,
there really isn't. It
different.
stands alone. And I don't mean that to put it on a pedestal. I just mean that there are a few RPGs out there that are just like wholly, original experiences, and Saga is one of those. I've never played a game with that mechanic ever since. I wish a team would do something like that with that kind of mechanic. But I mean, just everything about it is unique. So I mean, whether you like it or not, you can't deny that it's just there's nothing like it.
No.
Yeah, it's a shame because the games director was talking about making another Panzer Dragoon sort of RPG when Crimson Dragon released on the Xbox One about a decade ago, but obviously that bombed out critically and commercially, so then it just kind of died.
Killed it off, didn't it?
But yeah, that would have been interesting. I think that's probably quite a good segue into the topic, really, because we're talking about fan translations and the passions of some of these translation and mod projects, and we're talking about the rarity of games like Panzer Dragoon and the prices they command. But yeah, this one came up, I think, kind of born from an episode that we did recently around Sega's Forgotten Legacy. And then Dave, when James was on the show, I think you guys discussed this, is who carries on the Sega legacy in the future. Now, obviously, we're carrying a flag for the Sega Saturn, which celebrates 30 years next year, which is kind of scary.
That's crazy. Yeah. I mean, we play the Saturn, like, not ironically, we still play it because we enjoy it, but in my mind, it's like, it's not nearly that old.
No, not at all. It's like that old kind of, is it the wrestling meme that I've seen? And it's like what you think wrestling was 20 years ago, and it's like Hulk Hogan and Ultimate Warrior, and it's what actually was wrestling 20 years ago, and it's like Stone Cold and The Rock, and you're going, really? It's kind of the Saturn's kind of like that. It's like, no, it's not 30 years next year, but geez, it's
if you
teenagers and stuff, whenever it came out, it's just mad.
If you're looking at like a racing game from 20 years ago, you're looking at like Gran Turismo 3 or something like that, right? You're like, I don't know if I'm correct on that time, but I mean, like it's not Sega Rally, that's for sure. Yeah,
I think might even have Forza Motorsport then, or at least Metropolis Street Racer 2. Not Metropolis Street Racer, Project Gotham Racing 2.
Gotham, geez,
yeah. So it's crazy. The time's going so quickly. But Dave, you remember, before we started recording proper, you made a good point. Though it's probably a good place to start. Is what is Sega? Why is it so special to us? And do we think that Sega of today is different? And I think probably the answer is that they are different.
We do, they are. I wonder, like, I'm not a kid, and so I don't know if that makes a difference. Like, I do have hope, because I see Jesse engage, like, he loves Sonic. He has Sonic pajamas. He loves the movie. He loves this little Genesis Mini. I see him playing the games. I have a mini disc player in the living room, and I'm a nerd, so I went through a period of time where I was just making my own mini discs, making my own little mixtapes, and I've got like Sonic 1, 2, and 3. I got Sonic CD. I've got all of this video game music on mini disc, right? And Jesse, I'll walk in and he's sitting there, concentrating. He's sitting there down by the hi-fi equipment, and he's putting on this, and he's just like pressing play and going through the tracks and listening to like all of this old Sonic music, right? And he loves it. I'm just like, okay, well, maybe there's hope for the future that that younger generations will still love Sonic or be interested in Sega, But I don't necessarily know that they'll look at it the same way that we did growing up, right? With the Mega Drive or the Genesis, like physical. It's hard for him to. One of the reasons why I got him the Genesis Mini was so that he could have something physical, like a physical Sega console that he could associate with, like, this plays games. It's not just your computer emulating games, or it's not just Nintendo's online service that is here and gone tomorrow, and the games are always changing, like streaming. It's a bespoke little console with a ton of like cool games on it that you can enjoy, because he doesn't have the same relationship with physical media that we do, the boxes, the manuals, the what do you want to call it, the tradition, the ceremony of putting a game into a cartridge or blowing it off or having to clean the pins and stuff like that. There's just nothing,
even reading the manual on the way home from picking the game up,
yes,
to be on the bus on the way home,
100%.
or in the car.
100%.
If you couldn't play the game, you read the manual, right? And manuals like Link to the Past, that was like a book. You look at all the hand-drawn illustrations, or Mario Kart, they would they, especially the Japanese, love to like make the manual like a little treat that you could look through and kind of get a feel for the game. And if you were a kid, you'd read it under your blanket at night or whatever because you couldn't
Oh
play,
man.
you know?
Well, you got the PAL manuals, but they were like that thick, but only your little bit was a tiny, because you had like 40
Oh
languages
yeah,
in it,
you
'cause it's for Europe.
because you had all the languages. Exactly. You're just like, don't need all that.
German, French, don't need that.
I mean, Peter, I know so like as somebody who has a crazy Saturn collection and all of his boxes are pristine and stuff, Peter's smart. He folded his boxes, like all of his boxes, he folded them flat. And I was like, why didn't I think to do that? You know, like all my boxes are in garbage condition because all the corners are scuffed and everything like that. But he got the idea to just like disassemble everything and flatten them, and then they're like pristine even to this day. But I know Peter feels the same way, right? About the manuals and everything.
Oh yeah, I mean, I remember getting my local small mom and pop, video game shop to order me a copy of Panzer Dragoon Saga when it came out, because by then games just weren't even at retail anymore, Saturn games. So, you had to really kind of have connections to get those last few games. And sure enough, he ended up getting it for me. And yep, that was me opening it on the bus on the way home and reading through the manual, because that's just what you did, right? And so, I think back now and go, oh my God, what was I doing? But that's what you did. And, to this day, when I go through a Saturn game that I maybe haven't played before or haven't played in a long, long while, if I get stumped, so the first thing I do is I'll reach for the manual. Even though I've got, my phone on me, so I can just Google it and probably get a faster, better, more accurate result. But there's just something about it. It's a way of gaming that I don't think, folks that, are newer to gaming than we are really kind of understand. It's just the way we kind of grew up gaming,
Yep.
It's not the same anymore, I don't think.
There's actually like, there's actually considerable content in the manual, and sometimes it's like required reading, in order to get somewhere with the game, or in order to get everything out of the game, right? Because now it's like everything is either included in a tutorial, or it's just like the game is made to be super intuitive and there's just not that much hiding beneath the surface. But with the Saturn, very much so, like some of those manuals contain secrets or hints or more context for the story and stuff like that. And it's like, if you don't have the manual, you have no clue what you're doing. And that it was that way for me with Dragon Force, until I actually bought a physical copy and read the manual. It was like, oh, okay, well, this makes a lot more sense, like when you have the manual, so.
Because Dan, you sent me that Amiga copy of Mortal Kombat.
Yeah.
And I remember the manual for that as well from back in the day, but it just kind of unlocked a memory whenever I was flicking through it, because also the Amiga only had one button to do everything, right? It wasn't like one like Mega Drive or Genesis or 3 buttons or 6. But in the manual, under every character's BIOS, it's got like their background, blood type, special moves. But it had a bit of a fatality, and it said on it, figure this out yourself and write it here, and it leaves a space for you to write the combination to do the fatalities. I think, it's interactive manuals, it's like, just making that part of the actual experience in itself, But the whole reading the manual on the way home, and that anticipation of, getting upstairs, getting in the front door, turning on the TV, and then you fire the disc or the cartridge in, and then boom, you're playing. I miss that immediacy of if you pick up a game on disc, it's like, well, I might get to play it tomorrow by the time I get in, put a disc in, install it, do that 100 gig day one update or something, whatever's there. So it's a fact as well that whenever you buy a console now, you're told, if you're buying it for your kids, it's like the advice is to set it up the night before so that they don't have to wait on Christmas morning. It's like,
right. You're not wrong. I mean, it's just like getting a new console set up is a pain. It's a whole process, and you have to do several updates, and then you have to update the games because they've been patched to hell and back. I mean, that's the thing is, today I was looking at, so I picked up No Man's Sky, and that said right on the box, like includes all the expansion packs. It includes everything basically, and it still had an update. I don't know how sizable it was, but it was not. It was a sizable update. One of the games I was looking at picking up was the Spyro Reignited trilogy, right? But on the Switch, it says right on the front, internet download required. It's like a 9 gig download. You literally own nothing. Yeah. And if your Switch gets bricked and years from now the server's down, you just own a little chunk of plastic. You might as well. That tastes really bad, by the way. I know this. I don't know why I know this, but the Switch cartridges taste really bad because they don't want kids. You know what it is? I was like going through the boxes trying to look for a game, and I just put one in my mouth because I was like holding on to it, while I use my hands. And I was like, God, that tastes terrible. They really don't want kids eating those things, but yeah, no, it's. So I refuse to get any of the games, and I know I'm the old man yelling at the sky, but I refuse to get any of the physical games that say requires internet download, because in that case, you pretty much own nothing, and that game will not be functional without their servers being online, later on, So it's like I really try to limit my Switch collecting to stuff that's like complete, self-contained. Sonic Mania is great, it's pretty much it is what it is, Same thing with Metroid Prime. It was a port, right? It's not, they're not adding anything to it, right? So it's like the Metroid Prime remaster was pretty much self-contained. There wasn't any update when I bought it. I just played it. So yeah, there's the legacy of gaming right there, is that everything is a download and you don't really own anything. And I harp on that a lot, but
yeah,
it's just kind of sad. In the meantime, we have the Genesis or Mega Drive carts that we can just pound them into the machine and play, boom.
And there it is. I mean, there was an immediacy and kind of an excitement to the whole industry back then, back when we were fans of Sega and back when Sega were in it. I mean, Sega were really leading the charge for a lot of innovations there. And it's crazy to think now Sega, this software only company, and comparatively, a lot of what they do is very safe. They just canned hyenas, which look kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And all they've really got on their slate now is two Like a Dragon or Yakuza games and Sonic. Whereas in the past, the Saturn didn't have any of the Mega Drive classics on there. Sega were quite happy to write, well, here's this brand new console that does stuff that's completely different and out there. And here's a bunch of new IPs. Obviously, Virtua Fighter was a known quantity, but then that was revolutionary in itself and kind of spearheading in terms of technology and what hadn't been done before. And that sort of inventiveness is almost gone from the industry now. I think Nintendo are probably the only ones. I think when we were having a similar conversation a few months back, I said the Tears of the Kingdom is probably one of the few games that kind of embodies that whole Sega ethos, inventiveness that we saw back in the day.
Yeah. I mean, that's like half the reason I wish Nintendo would buy Sega. I never thought I would, say that, back in the day. But I mean, at this point, like Nintendo, they do innovate probably more than anybody else. I mean, they're playing with their own house money. They've got a lot of cash reserves. They've got strong IPs. They still rest on their laurels from time to time, but as a game company with such a rich heritage of being a game company, I do feel like they still innovate here and there and try to create, some new experiences. I don't know, folks may disagree with me on that, but for the most part, I feel like James said it perfectly. It's all about the money, right? I mean, the more money that gets involved, the more safe they're going to want to play it, because they don't, this is going to sound cynical, but they don't really care about us nearly as much as they do about the shareholders, right? Yeah. And the stock, they want the stock to go up. And in order to do that, you just got to keep pumping out stuff that's safe, right? Tom Kalinske said in that email, he said, the industry needs to change. Like we need to find a solution to address the problem of the profit margins being so bare, like so thin, paper thin. Back in the Wild West of gaming, it was a scrappy business. They weren't making that much. They were publishing all this physical media. They were trying to implement the whole razor and blade kind of thing. You sell the consoles at a loss and you try to make it up on software. But I mean, they had to pay royalties to the developers. They had to pay for the publishing, which was considerable. And then the retailers, wanted to be able to sell it for a certain amount and make a certain amount on it. So it was just like, at the end of the day, they weren't making that much money. And Tom Kalinske, what he said was kind of prophetic, is that we're going to have to find a new way. They did find a new way, much to my horror, is that, games now are just a little credit card that you swipe at the register and it activates, and now it's an eShop download, and it's almost 100% profit, right? Like those cards, they can just shit those out. Part of my friend, like they're nothing. They're nothing, but I mean, you get nothing. You get a license to play a creative piece of content, so it's like, it's like Redbox or something like that. You're going and getting an extended rental, basically. Here you can download it on your console. What now? What?
You went all Willy Wonka there. You get nothing.
You get nothing.
You lose.
It's just it's night and day different. But that's the solution they found. So that sounds amazing. If I'm like a stockholder, that sounds amazing. If I am interested in making money, because the fact is, people keep buying it. They don't stop buying it. They're still buying it. So they figured, we don't really need to keep selling the physical games, do we? Because everybody keeps buying the eShop ones, right? So let's just stop selling the physical ones, right? And so now, of course, Best Buy is like kind of wrapping up things on their, the physical media. And
same here.
Walmart. Yep. I go to Walmart or Target. You know what I see? Rows and rows of the credit cards for every single game, and then maybe one or two physical box copies and a bunch of empty slots with nothing. Just a little plaque where it says what the game was, but there's no copies. They're like, sorry, we're not stocking any new ones.
Something that with Funko Pops.
Hi. It's like my nephew, like he's 17. And if he wants a new game, what would you want for your birthday or Christmas? We all had a wish list of games when we were like kids, and you'd have to wait till birthdays or Christmas to get them. Like now he just goes, I'll just get me PlayStation Store vouchers. I'm like,
yeah.
This. And that comes back to the kind of the main crux of the kind of conversation, is that, what Sega were about in the legacy they had back then. Obviously they had the mass creativity. What Peter said before we kind of started recording proper is that, these companies back then, and Dave, you just alluded to it, these kind of credit card top up, almost like a mobile phone top up, back in the day. It's like they're great for shareholders, but for the gamer part of it, like Sega at the time, and it could well be that it was because it was cutting edge of technology, that the advancements were moving so fast that it was the creators and the artists who were leading the way. It wasn't like, you look at the games now, obviously like multi-million pound, franchises, and the development cost of like a God of War or Spider-Man 2. But back then it just felt like, the amount of innovation it was because Sega were leading that charge, with the arcade technology. They were trying to kind of downscale to bring those titles home. It did just feel like it was the artists that were leading the way. Whereas now, as you said, Dave, it's just shareholder driven. It's
like they still wanted to make money. They did still want to make money. Every company wants to make money, but you're absolutely right. Like the video game industry is what dictates everything, how everything works. And back then, like you say, there weren't as many rules. There weren't as many formulas. They were still searching for the formula, So it's like in that search, they were scrappy and they were willing to take risks. They were really willing to try new things because any new thing could hit on, the way forward, Don't you feel, Peter? Like the so much innovation too. Like, wasn't that key to Sega's entire outlook? Was like technological innovation.
Oh, you bet. I mean, think the best example I can think of right now is the full motion video genre, right? I mean, for a few years it came on the scene, it was just the hottest thing because all of a sudden you've got real actors. You don't have these, wee little sprites running around doing whatever. And so it was super hot, and then it was super not. Like, it just vanished, and so they just moved on to the next thing, right? Like, there was just a ton of that. I mean, the one thing that I absolutely adore about the Saturn library in particular is the just sheer variety you're going to get, you know?
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
mean, I can have just as much fun with a visual novel as I can have with, Nights into Dreams or Sega Rally or whatever. There's
Hmm.
just an incredible variety, and that variety doesn't really exist with the big name publishers of today, certainly not even Sega themselves. I
Mostly
mean,
indie
maybe that
stuff.
indie stuff, right? Yeah, like that's kind of where that lies. So it's almost as if back then, Sega and everybody else, they were like the indie of today, right?
They were.
They were the small time trying to, make a buck any way they could, tried all these different,
Hmm.
methods or genres or implementations of their ideas. And, you only had so much power that you could work with.
Hmm.
So you had to get super creative, and then all of a sudden Nintendo would come out with, I don't know, Donkey Kong Country or whatever. So you had to one up that, and there was just a lot of that. And I'm just, that's not that there's no that's not safe. That's not like it is
Hmm.
today.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
could
even
put out a stinker, right? And it was okay because you just put out another, attempt, you know, a few months
even
down the
early
line.
PlayStation, even early play like PlayStation 1, there's a lot of games on there that feel almost like indie games, right? Like cuz and I
Mm-hmm.
mean arguably of varying quality, but the point is that as it goes on, you get less and less of that. Or it's basically like the big studios are like, well, we're going to play it safe, but if you want to release some, indie game on our download shop, or it's going to it might get a physical version, but it's probably going to be like limited run that publishes it, and then it's going to be super
Mm-hmm.
expensive
Mm-hmm.
because those are good games. They're independent games that are. Yeah, I mean it's crazy. Like I went to a game store recently and I looked at just a wall of Switch game. They were proudly claiming that they had like every Switch game available, and it's amazing how much stuff there actually is on Switch. But all the good stuff, all the stuff I was really interested in was like indie stuff. It was like indie studios,
Yeah.
super rare or limited run, or like small little publishers, and the games were like 60 to 80 bucks, like because there's so few of them and everybody wants good stuff. But you're absolutely right. Sega, as a big time name and publisher, were churning out games almost like indie studio. Like, you guys do this, you guys run with this idea. They had this idea to take Japanese and American developers and put them together and create almost like a school where they would teach the American folks some Japanese, and they would teach the Japanese folks some English, and they would trade secrets and trade programming ideas. This was called Sega Technical Institute, and they
Yeah.
hired Mark Cerny. They hired Mark Cerny to lead technical Sega Technical Institute. It was actually a really cool idea. It was like an example of this kind of stuff that Sega would do. That was Nakayama was like, well, I want us to be able to get into everything and have our hand in everything, not just the arcade division, right? So they had this idea. Of course, they completely botched the visas,
Yeah.
to bring the Japanese folks over. So like they applied for the wrong visas, and then the U.S. was like, now you're banned. You can't apply for any more visas. So it was like, okay, we started this thing, and we have like one Japanese guy, But I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that aside, Mark Cerny worked at Atari, and like I believe it was Mark Cerny who he got started on like hardware and electromechanical stuff, and then they just let him make games because it was so early on that it was like, yeah, you can work on that too, and that's
Yeah.
how folks back then would cut their teeth on like video gaming. It was just like everything wasn't so closed down. Now to try to do lateral moves to different departments is like a lot harder. They just want you to stay in your lane and if you do motion capture, you do motion capture. If you do,
Mm-hmm.
video game music, you have no chance of getting over into, like
Yeah.
that kind of mobility in the field is not as common as it was back then. It was just like, oh, okay, a little bit of programming. You go ahead, try to make a game,
You make a
and
level. You have a
Right.
shot.
Well, it was
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
when we were talking about Panzer Dragoon,
Yeah.
it was the director on that he was saying he was just doing menial work at Sega.
Yeah.
and he said oh, I've got an idea for a game. And I was like, okay, here's a team. It's, I mean,
Right?
it's a
People go
team
and
of
make it.
15, go and make it. But I think that's kind of the that really radiates from the games. And I think for me personally, and imagine for you guys as well, it's the reason why I love the Saturn. Is my favorite console of all time, because it was a new frontier. 3D wasn't well explored, and a lot of what you see on there is, as you say, experimental. You have games like Dragon Force, which there's still nothing really like it out there, or Panzer Dragoon Saga, which in terms of an RPG, there's no other RPGs like it. Just the approach to 3D, and obviously the Saturn and the PlayStation at the time were working with what was comparatively to now very, very limited 3D power, but they're finding all these solutions. Like the Saturn would deploy VDP2 to do certain things with the background and the floor and everything, and then build on top of that. You've got all these games that will have like 3D backgrounds and 2D sprites like Grandia, or you'll have games that have got 2D backgrounds and 3D sprites like Resident Evil, and they're just trying to find all these creative solutions to get around all this stuff. And it was just, for me, it was probably the most exciting time to be a gamer.
That's actually that's amazing. I never really thought about that, but as you're saying that, I'm thinking to myself, like, maybe the closest comparison of like video game fans would have been like the folks who experience arcade games at their birth. Think about it this way. So when you had nothing prior and you started seeing arcade games, right? Like Centipede, or I don't know, Asteroids or something like that. Everything was new, right? And when people were just figuring out how to draw graphics on a rasterized screen or vector screen, if it's like Vectrex or something, like when the arcades were brand new, it might have been that same feeling, because then the 8-bit consoles came and the 16-bit consoles came, and all they were doing was iterating on the arcades, right, which came before them. So it was really kind of like not unknown territory, but 3D polygon graphics was a completely new frontier, right? So it's like a perfect storm, like Dan is saying. It's the perfect time in game history where nobody knows what they're doing anymore. Everybody, you had to throw the book out and start from scratch, because it didn't matter how good you were at 2D. You could have been like the best at like 2D platformers or something like that. But then they say, okay, now we need to put everything in 3D, and nobody knew what the hell they were doing. It was literally all just kind of like trial and error. And so that's why the Saturn has that feeling, because it was a completely new frontier, 3D graphics for consumers and for developers.
Because you look as well, whenever you think about early Saturn games, and then like Yu Suzuki bringing in the Sega graphics library for the Saturn. Yeah. And then you had teams like the CS team that made Sega Rally, the guys that ported Virtual On, like they didn't use the SGL, so they found their own way to work with the hardware to get results. Yeah, it's just, as Dan's saying, finding solutions to get things done.
Yeah,
there was no Unreal Engine, right?
No,
yeah, exactly.
SGL, of course, wasn't even fully realized. Like it could have gotten much better, right? Had it been given the time, But again, I mean, it was better than nothing, right? But you got folks even today, like Seven Shades, who's doing like CubeCat, and he's moved completely away from SGL, partially for legal concerns, but also because his own renderer is better than SGL. It's more efficient, and he's able to tweak things and do more with it than what he was able to do with SGL. But yeah, definitely, it would have been exciting and scary to be, like one of those folks in the amusement divisions who was working on 2D games, and you were like, well, if I want job security, I better learn really quick, how to make a 3D game,
Well, look at the Virtua Cop guys, and Nick's, documentary. Yeah. These guys were like literally like interns almost. They were like they'd never had a major project. They had never done any kind of like project planning or anything. Let's just see, you guys,
warm bodies.
You can port one of our biggest arcade games to the Saturn. When you go,
right?
Yeah. It's like,
isn't that wild?
It's
wild. And look at the results. It's astounding. Yeah.
Well, they would work. They would sleep under their desks.
Yes, aye.
And they would. That's what we say. Like, So you look at homebrew developers, and they have like years to work on this stuff, right? Because it's just working in their free time, right? And you look at Western developers back in the day who worked like a typical 9 to 5, and Western games for the most part are kind of like lacking a few things here and there. And then, the Japanese developers who like crunch was their life, that was just
culture,
their
wasn't
culture.
it? Aye.
You lived at your job and you slept at your job and you just worked and worked and worked. So infinitely more hours put into a lot of those Japanese developed games just because of their culture,
Mhm.
So it's crazy, but yeah.
It's like I think if you plot it where Virtua Fighter is probably the catalyst for a lot of what came after, and you look at, because I think we've been looking a lot of kind of the Saturn history, and then we've done a Virtua Fighter video that's going to be coming the Monday after recording this. And there's a lot of stuff like we mentioned the development of the PlayStation there that was going to be a sprite-based machine, because developers just didn't want to move over to 3D. They didn't know how to make a 3D game. They were worried about 3D. It would stick to 2D. That's what we know. And then Virtua Fighter hits, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, everyone's got to move to 3D. And that's kind of, and again, it's Sega that's spearheading that movement, albeit just the arcade arm is, the home division arm.
There were a few gods that knew how to do 3D. There was like Yu Suzuki. There was the Cuthbert, the dude that did Star Fox with Arcanaut. So there were folks out there who you looked up to, and they were like doing 3D before anyone was doing 3D. So it was like some folks knew how to do it, but it's like though they set a precedent, and then everybody was like, well, we all have to be doing this now, Yeah. And there was no book, there was no school, there was no. So yeah, it's like if you had an interest and you were willing to take a risk, they were like, get in here. I mean, remember back when a leather company made a video games console, Connecticut Leather Company, right? Coleco. I mean, it's kind of like that again, where it was like, okay, seismic change, the entire thing is being flipped on its face, and now the industry wants 3D. We have to give them what they want, and in order to stay competitive, but nobody knows how to do it. So they're just like, crack open these books, learn how to use these chips, trial and error. And some of those early games really sucked, but they figured it out, they figured it out.
But that kind of brings us on to that kind of other point as well. We're talking about, you'd mentioned it as well, Dave. We're talking about the legacy Sega had and has, and it's had such an impact on all of us sitting here that it's compelled us, some of us older, but we're all kind of similar ages, 40s. I think, Dan, you're just coming up for 40. But
next month.
It's compelled us decades later, to be sitting here still passionate about the company, still passionate about the console and the games, creating this content.
Right.
So what can you envisage, like Xbox or PlayStation podcasts going in like 3 decades time? I just think that the level of kind of impact that Sega had on us, I think it's probably, I think Nintendo fans would say the same, rightly so, but the sheer emotional impact that Sega have had on our lives, it's a key part of us growing up. It's everybody says there's a certain game. Like Peter, I can imagine you can look at a game in your collection. You can probably remember where you were, who you were with, what store you bought it from. There's so much attachment emotionally to these games. And I think, and the fact that what Sega did has compelled us to sit here and still have these conversations and create this content.
Yeah, I almost don't know if I have if I'm articulate enough or have the words to really describe what Sega means to me. But I think that folks who are like super fans of Sega, we're definitely biased. There's definitely nostalgia involved. We feel like an extreme emotional attachment to this company for one reason or another. I think that I feel like a lot of their games were like wholesome or just pure video games. Like Peter said about Knights, like Knights is a video game. It's nothing else. It's a video game. And it's just that pure joy of playing a video game that is such a perfectly realized and executed thing. for what it is. You know, I mean, I don't know. There's like very little pretense in Sega games. Again, bringing the arcade home. They never really like pulled like they told you what they were trying to do. They were trying to bring arcade experiences home, and then every once in a while you'd have some original like game like nights or something like that it would just attempt to, I don't know, give you some fun gameplay, but also cause you to have some kind of emotional, attachment with these characters and stuff like that. I don't know, the Blue Skies Sega, so when I say Blue Skies Sega, I'm thinking of Daytona, I'm thinking of Sega Rally, I'm thinking of Virtua Fighter. They always did this thing where they put like this, it's almost like, Mary Kay has the color pink or whatever there, or, certain companies like trademark a certain color. I feel like that Sega blue, it's the same blue in the logo and everything. And,
it's all over the place. It's in Fantasy Zone. It's in Golden Axe. It's in Outrun. Yes. It's in Super Hang On. It's in the original Hang On. It's in Afterburner. It's
like I can't prove this. I can't prove that there was any kind of like concerted effort to do this. But it just, to me, it seems like optimism. You know what I mean? Like that Blue Sky Sega is like the optimism of like, we can do anything. We can make anything. Take risks, create a game about space Channel 5, like dancing aliens and stuff like that. Or I mean, and not all of it is great. Seaman is like an acquired taste, but it's different, and you just don't get that kind of stuff anymore. If you do, you get it from independent developers, which are not that different from like fans that are making like fan games and stuff like that, right? Because we feel that, we remember that feeling, and we're like wanting to recreate it, so it's like fans want to like patch these games and translate more so that we can experience more of what Saturn had to offer, or make new experiences that are bold and risk-taking like that, which you just don't get. But again, all of that's a lot of words, and I still don't know if it really pegs what 90s Sega was all about,
and that's why we have all these podcast episodes, all these videos, and all this stuff to try and express that feeling.
I don't know if Sonic Frontiers gives me that same feeling. You know what I mean? Like Sonic Frontiers is not a bad game. I enjoyed Sonic Frontiers, but the whole time I was playing it, I kind of felt like this is just Breath of the Wild, and there are many articles online that try to like completely disavow that. They're like, Sonic Frontiers is nothing like Breath of the Wild. I'm like, are you kidding me? Let me sit down and just take you through every little trope, the fake copy of Breath of the Wild. And I'm like, yeah, it's great. It's just like Breath of the Wild with Sonic. I'll buy that. But I mean, it's not going to give me the same feeling as a lot of those old Sega games, because Nintendo, they do their own thing. Nintendo gives me a feeling too. Nintendo games, a lot of those old Nintendo games give me a certain feeling as well. And it's a positive feeling, but it's not Sega, what kind of feeling does Sega give you, especially like 90s and like Dreamcast? So like, Saturn and Dreamcast Sega, like what do you associate with that?
So for me, it's just being at the forefront of gaming. I mean, they always were, the Master System came out after NES, and the Master System was a massive thing over here in the UK, and that was the first console that we had in our house, and that was just so far above and beyond everything else that I'd seen at that point. I mean, we had 8-bit micros. I had played an NES at my grandma's house. My uncle had one, but it was seeing Sonic on the Master System which actually blew me away, and I was just like, wow, this is amazing.
Sonic on the Master System, that's what really
that's what turned me to Sega. And then the Mega Drive was the next step up. I saw Altered Beast fairly early on. A friend had an import console, and I was just like, oh my god, this is like the greatest thing ever. Obviously it's Altered Beast, so that doesn't probably hold that much weight, but in my mind's eye as a kid seeing that blew me away. And then Virtua Fighter in the arcades, everything they did just seemed to be bleeding edge. The Saturn, to me, was this exotic, unknowable, amazing system. And then the Dreamcast innovated in so many ways. And then what you see in the arcades, Model 1 was, outrageous. Afterburner in its original cap is one of my earliest memories. And that itself was just the sheer audacity to create a game like that moves at that speed with that level of obviously 2D but 3D depth of field, almost like Star Fox obviously borrows a lot from Afterburner. Then you've got Model 1, which, you know, Virtual Racing blew me away. Model 2 even more so. The Model 3 just seemed like light years ahead of the curve, because that
Sega in the arcade will always be unmatched. In my, like, Namco came close, but nobody could touch Sega in the arcade, right?
Yeah, once you saw Virtua Fighter 3 and Scud Race, it just felt like game over, because those games, the arcade versions, still look like modern games.
Absolutely. It's Top Skater. Yeah. I mean, or the Harley Davidson ride, you know, Crazy Taxi. A lot of those games, like, nobody else would even try to make that stuff. You know, Sega they just, when it comes to the arcade, they just hit everything out of the park. I don't know if I ever played a bad Sega arcade game, because their arcade division was just, they were gods, you know, in terms of game create, you know, and it was just like, they just knew that stuff so well, you know. But yeah, you know,
and then
it's great. What about you, James?
Well, for me, and Dan knows this also, the kind of my background in terms of wanting a Mega Drive and never getting one, but Sega was always like that unattainable top tier. Like, it was, if you had a Sega, like, you'd made it. That was you had the best. Right, I was like, yeah, you can have your Amiga and your NES and your Spectrums and your C64, but if you have a Sega, then you've got the best there is. So, like, also in school, I had like the Atari ST and then the Amiga. Lots of friends primarily had Mega Drives, few Super Nintendo owners, but not many. So, like, my experience with the Mega Drive was very limited. Like, friends' consoles or my friend's cousin's Mega Drive 2 with Street Fighter 2 Champion Edition and a couple of 6-button controllers, seeing it in the store, like pining for like any footage of Sonic on Games Master when it was on like TV here. Like, if I turned on Games Master and they had a Sonic challenge, it just made my night, because I get to see Sonic. Don't have YouTube back then. You can't just watch games on demand how you want it. You had to wait for every Thursday night. If it was Thursday night, 6:30 on Channel 4. It's like Dominic Diamond going, "Hello, we're going to have a challenge on Sonic and the Hedgehog." And I'm like, "Oh, here we go." It was like you got to actually see Sonic. But then I get taken to the arcades with my uncle, and Virtua Fighter was there. Excuse me. And that was it. Whenever I seen that, like, nothing could touch that. But I wasn't in the loop Sega-wise. So, like, I had no idea about like the Saturn until that surprise unveiling at Monco did, that we all know about because I've mentioned it umpteen times. But you know, getting to see that in the home, and whenever he opened that door and he had the Saturn hooked up to his surround sound and a big rear projection 50-inch TV, like, that was
burned into your brain, right? That moment.
It was totally indistinguishable in my mind. I walked in that room and that was the arcade. It was like, I didn't notice glitching polygons. I didn't notice the lower frame rate. I didn't notice any of the things that people today take almost great joy in pointing out, that these flaws, you know. It's like they didn't. To me, he opened that door and it was there, and that was that. From that moment, you know, I was hooked. Everything the Saturn did, like you said it as well, you know, it was like it was just so fresh. It was like a totally new frontier, I think was the term you used. It was just, everything was new. Like, it would bring like new games back from work every weekend. There's something else like Panzer Dragoon, roundabout kind of the launch kind of period. There's a new Saturn game, try that. Although one of his worst purchases was Street Fighter, the movie, real battle on film. Jesus Christ.
I actually still like that game.
Oh,
for what it is. I know it's cheesy.
It's just Super Turbo with a live action skin.
With the live action skins on top. And I mean, you know, let's not forget that Saturn had a bunch of excellent 2D games that were like the pinnacle of the genre, you know, like the perfect example of just 2D gaming at its best as well. But I think part of it for me, and this sounds a little bit different with the UK. So because you're talking about Sega just being the unobtainable thing, but it's like it represents the best, right? And I don't know that I had that kind of mentality in the States. Of course, like there was way too much of a bias towards Nintendo.
Yeah.
And it was just like it was like if you grew up in the 80s, you almost had it like, put imbued into your DNA that it was like had to be Nintendo. Nintendo's always better, right? So for me, it was a little bit of the underdog thing. I root for the underdog. I am a Padres fan, which is like a never-ending curse. Like we always look good on paper. We always kind of start well, but we just can't finish. We just can't cross the finish line. And but I love that. I never root for like I've never been a front runner. That's just not who I am. I always kind of want to see the underdog triumph. It's that David and Goliath kind of thing, right? And that's kind of how I viewed the Saturn. Because I saw this is a wonderful console. It's got so many great games. It actually is legitimately a good console with good games. People just don't understand that. They don't see it. Why is it that I can see this and they can't? Appreciate it. Because most people just went with the PlayStation and the Nintendo 64, and so they're not going to look at. They may not look at Sega the same way I do.
Yeah.
Right, Peter? Like, didn't you say that too? That you kind of had that going on with the underdog thing?
Oh, 100%. I mean, for me, playing Sega, whether it was Genesis, Mega Drive, or especially Saturn, it made me feel good. Like it was exciting. Yeah. It was fun. And I mean, yes, of course, so there was no YouTube, there was no internet, whatever. So you couldn't consume, all of that on demand. So it was limited to, what you owned, what physical games you owned. And, you would get your sort of monthly fix through magazines and things like that. That's where you would see screenshots and whatever of all the games you wanted to play or things that were coming up. And, you'd quickly be leafing through the cheat code sections and things like that. And so there was a culture about it that just doesn't exist anymore, Multiplayer was online. It was, get a buddy over or friends or whatever, enemies even too, and off you'd go in the same physical room, right?
Right.
So that's just how it was. And so, it's changed so much. It's significantly different. And, I'll share just the moment I knew that gaming was changing away from what I liked was back in '98 when Ocarina of Time came out. I got it, I played it, and I thought it was, there's just so much hype about it, and I thought it was great. But there was something really weird about it, something off about it, and I couldn't put my finger on it for the longest time until I realized how scripted it was and how much, Navi was there to always lead you on and tell you what to do next. When you were seeing dialogue on the screen, things that were important that you had to pay attention to all of a sudden were bolded and highlighted. So it wasn't that pure, gaming experience where it's like, here you go, figure it out and have fun doing it. All of a sudden it was, this is the experience we want you to have, and it's just narrowed and whatever. And I get it, it's to make gaming more accessible, but right there I was like, okay, if this is where gaming is going, that's not where I want to game. And to me, Sega was kind of like the last bastion of that, where you had that sort of pure gaming experience. And so it was sad, of course, when they got out of the console business and everything. But yeah, for me, Saturn was where it resonated with me the most as a player. This was the kind of gaming that I wanted to play.
Like you could have so much that was like undocumented, right? Like with Knights, for example.
Oh yeah.
People, even today, like people struggle to understand how to play that game or how to really come, because
100%.
The manual doesn't do a great job of explaining it to you, and even beyond that, you got stuff like the King Pian that you discover, like with the the castle and all the little extra stuff that's completely undocumented, and you're just supposed to figure it out. You're just supposed to mess with the game, push as many buttons as you can, just see what happens, and that they don't really make a whole lot of games like that anymore that don't at least like give you a bunch of like red flags where you're just like, okay, go over here or do this, something's going to happen, and that's the way game design is nowadays. It's like, you push a button and then the camera flies over 200 feet over here, and it's like, okay, something happened over here. With Tomb Raider, it used to be you'd pull a lever and you'd get like a sound cue or something like that, but they're not going to hold your hand and tell you where to go. You have to go find it, because that's part of the exploration. If you were literally Lara Croft in a cave, would you get that camera like flying over to the next level? No, you'd be like, this is a little scary, because I have to go over and figure out what just opened, and a bear might kill me. So 100%. you had more of that kind of like unknown, and so there was the fear of the unknown, but there was also like the excitement that, okay, well, we're just gonna kind of make our way through this inch by inch and kind of like explore and find out. And so things were just so much more exciting when you entered a room and had T-Rexes running at you, because you had no idea what was coming, But
even outside of like the action genre, because that's an amazing point, Peter, because it made me think of what came after Zelda was Shenmue. And Shenmue doesn't give you waypoints, and it doesn't highlight the text, and everything is completely spoken. And you don't, obviously, you don't run into T-Rexes or anything like that. But when you're in Yokosuka, you're just basically wandering around. You've got no waypoint. All you know is that you're looking for a black car that drove up there one day, and you just go around, and that was part of the wonder. And I think that maybe that's part of the reason why Shenmue gets such a raw deal these days. I know control-wise it doesn't handle that well, but you had nothing. You had your little notebook that you could pull out now and again, but you didn't have the text highlighted. It didn't tell you where to go. You basically had to just piece it together yourself. And when you say that that's the last Sega with the last bastion of that sort of game, that's what I'd 100% agree with you there.
Yeah, you almost felt like proud of yourself when you figured out a puzzle or something, or figured out where the next thing to go. You're like, oh, okay, this makes sense. Like everything made sense, but it was still up to you to kind of put it all together. Shenmue was a great game. Like, and again, great example of Sega just completely pioneering new technology with the weather system and the day night cycles and everything like that, and just always trying to push the technology and push games forward, what games could be, but without, like you say, without making the whole darn thing like a tutorial or something like that. You're going to say something, James, I can see.
I know, it's just the thing about Shenmue that always makes me laugh, and you're talking about not having your handheld, right? But whenever you get your job at the factory doing the warehouse, the forklift stuff, and you get to get the bus to work, whenever you actually realise that the timetable that's at the bus stop is real. And you've just missed you've just missed the bus, and you hold in the trigger to go into first person, and you move the stick to zoom in the times, and you actually have the timetable, and and you look at your watch, and it's like, that's 10 minutes for the next bus, I'll just hang about. It's like, and lo and behold, it turns up on time. It's like just little details like that. It doesn't say to you, like a game now would go, you have missed the bus, wait for the next one. Yes, no. It's like, no, you had to look and go, all right, okay, next one's June 10th. And that makes people go, that just sounds so boring in like real life. But that was the point. Like you mentioned, the weather system, it was based on real weather forecasts of that time. So it's just, just wee little things like that. Gaming does, I think, and this does sound like angry old men shouting at the cloud, doesn't it? But it's like that whole, what was it? Was it God of War or one of the other games that it was like, there's like a big monster, and it's like, it's weakest when you attack it from the rear. It's weakest, and it's like, well, let me figure that out. I don't need you to tell me.
It's incessant in God of War Ragnarok. I absolutely hated that.
Oh my god! Like if you're playing through Panzer Dragoon Saga and you are not using a guide, you're just going in blind, and it takes a while to figure out the patterns of the different dragons, the different flying creatures and stuff, and they all do have patterns. They all do have weak points, but you kind of have to figure that out for yourself. And there's trial and error, and you're going to die some, or you're going to have to start, you're going to have to fight other battles and to get your, score up on each battle. But I mean, you can figure it out for yourself. They don't tell you, No. So, but yeah, if you go into that game and you're playing with like a guide, it's going to tell you, okay, attack from the rear on this specific enemy, and it's like that kind of takes the fun out of just discovering it for yourself, Well,
remember the bit in the mines, the one bit again that comes to mind, that whole figure it out yourself.
Yeah.
There's a bit early on when you're going through the kind of obviously you've got the little kind of mines either side. You can choose to go in those or not. It doesn't tell you which ones to go in, but there's the fans, and you've got to deactivate the fans to stop. You know, there's monsters that they can't get in and out, so you've got to find. But you need to figure out that if I want to get through there, I need to turn these fans off, and you've got to find the right combination of what mines to go into. And then you fly in. There's one right at the far end. And you fly in, there's like it goes an ancient machine, and then you fire at it, and then the rumbling stops, and then it goes, oh, something turned off, and then you turn around and those fans have went off, and then you can progress. It's like, but it doesn't lead your hand and tell you how to do that. You had to use your brain and go, oh, I can't get through there because those are on. Then you had to find how to turn it off.
I kind of feel the same way about Super Metroid on the SNES. I don't know if you played that game, but I mean, Super Metroid was that kind of game where it was like very clever design. You could figure out everything, but you would get stumped every once in a while if there was like a weird wall jump that you had to figure out that's what you had to do, or you had to run really fast. But again, like it was just really good game design, no hand holding. But Nintendo was doing the hand holding thing even back with like Super Mario World. You know, they had the in-game tutorial kind of thing, you know, with those boxes that you would hit and it would give you the big dialogue telling you like, you can do this or you can do that, right? You know, and so that kind of hand holding tutorial stuff started really all the way back on the Super Nintendo. But you know, you'd have exceptions like Super Metroid, I think, or even Link to the Past, I think, didn't really give you too much in the way of, you know, they'd give you little clues, but that was it. And so yeah, with Sega, I can't even really think of a whole lot of they were so with Sega, it's almost frustrating sometimes how they would want you to just figure stuff out for yourself, and they might squirrel a little secret away in the manual, but of course you would have to read the manual. And you know, that's really the thing with folks today who might be playing the Saturn on an ODE, or, you know, burning their discs. And I highly recommend you go on, you know, Sega Retro or whatever, you know, get the manual, the digital PDF or whatever, and read through it, because it's going to help you on a lot of Saturn games. Because the manual is a lost art, really. You know, I don't have any manuals in my Switch games. The only ones I have are for like indie games. Every once in a while, an indie game will have like a little manual. And for the longest time, I've been thinking like, I would love to find a site that publishes manuals for the Switch games. You know, I would buy a bunch of them, you know, because I could probably make them myself, but I don't have time for that anymore. You know, yeah. So yeah.
What that comes back to as well, what is the kind of the legacy of our content then? You know, both not just obviously Shiro and Sega guys, but all the kind of people who do retro gaming content, in terms of, I think, not in terms of kind of standing in front of shelves and going, this is this and this is that, but I think in terms of, I think we both see what we do as being almost educational. You know, we talk about Sega's legacy, but Dan and I and Dave as well, whenever we were on kind of Shiro talking, you know, it's a legacy of our own that we're kind of leaving as well. It's like we're sort of hoping that there is future generations who are going to stumble across what we do in years to come, and hopefully it sort of imparts some of that kind of passion and knowledge onto these people to follow what we've done.
Yeah. For me, I'm not gonna lie, I think a lot of it has been selfish. I think that it's almost been like therapy. You know how you you know how you talk to a therapist and it's mostly just you talking, but what you're doing is you're discovering yourself. You're kind of figuring out, and I've had thoughts and feelings about Sega and about the Saturn and stuff my whole life, and I haven't really been able to like crystallize those thoughts until starting a podcast and like talking with Peter and being like, oh, that's what it is. Like that's what that feeling is. You know, being able to put to words a lot of the things that we've kind of thought but never really been able to. And I mean, it's kind of like a dismantling of things, tearing it down, kind of trying to give words and give names to things and kind of understand yourself better as a gamer, as a person. Part of it is community building. Like I'm so intently focused on building the Saturn community. And the reason for that is that there was no Saturn community. There was like a legit like PlayStation community. It was called school. Everybody had one, right? So
Yep.
it was just like you go to school and you got friends with PlayStations, or you could have friends with N64s, right? So they just existed, you know. But a Saturn community has to be made, you know. It has to be forged, you know, and all these people have to be pulled out of the woodwork and come together as one big, you know, group that all share the same interest, you know, so that we can finally like hash out all this stuff, you know. Years of you know, I've been thinking about this for years, and I love, you know, screw it, I love the original pack-in Virtua Fighter. I think it's great, and polygons and glitches and all, I think it's great, and I love the music and it plays well, and I just want to say that, I just want to get that out there, or say that, you know, Daytona USA is a great game, despite the fact that even my brother and I saw it for what it is and thought, this looks a little janky, you know, but then the more we played it, the more we enjoyed ourselves. And we're like, no, yeah, this is good. This is good. Even though it looks a little rough around the edges, it's great. You know, so like a lot of this stuff. Yeah. I think when Pat said, you want to start a podcast about Saturn, I was like, hell yeah, because I've been dying to talk about this stuff for so long, you know? So that's probably, but the legacy, is like what you leave behind. Right. And I guess I hope that what we leave behind is, you know, like a bunch of people that know about this console and that feel a sense of community around it.
Is it the same for you, Peter?
Yeah, I mean, quite similar. I mean, the majority of, I think, what I will leave behind is written, right? It'll be articles and you know, posts and things like that. And I look at what I write, and I think the main things I want to convey is that, you know, when it came to Saturn especially, I was passionate about it and I was serious about it, you know, and, you know, just in the past month, I've probably put 30 hours into Panzer Dragoon's Vi. I wanted to really focus on just the scoring system and just the amount of nuance and you know, new things that I've been able to discover that are not documented anywhere on the internet. They're not in the manuals. They're just things that I am discovering, you know, decades after the game came out. And so when I write my article, some of that will sort of filter in, you know, so that if years down the line, someone who's never laid eyes on a Saturn reads this, they're going to be able to see that, okay, this is an old game that this old dude enjoyed, but, you know, there was a lot more to it than I think was generally known at the time. And so I want that passion to come across. I want folks who may come across any of the content that I've put out to sort of see that, you know, this console meant a lot to this individual. Like there was a reason for it. Like, you know, whether it was, you know, like we were talking about, you know, a lot more of the sort of self exploration and discovering things on your own and documenting it. You know, just a few months ago, you know, having found out that Virtua Fighter 2 works with the floppy disk drive. No one knew. No one in the world knew. And we got it working, right? And so that's a cool feeling. And that's what I want to pass along. I mean, these days you can, you know, I'm sure within a week, the new Super Mario game, all the solutions and video walkthroughs and everything, it'll all be available, right? And so there's nothing, you know, that's tough. I think that really robs from the experience. And I think the gaming that we're talking about happened when that just wasn't a thing. And there just isn't, you know, that doesn't exist for people in the future to consume. And so I hope that part of what I'll be able to convey is what it was like, you know, to game in that sort of paradigm, because it's different now, right? So yeah, so that's where I hope that, and I guess maybe lastly is that I want to make sure that I come across as intelligent and accurate. You know, like there's a lot of misinformation or things like just get foggy in time. I mean, geez, there were things that I took for granted that everybody knew, you know, say within 10 years of the Saturn leaving retail. And now you realize that it's, you know, I was at a local sort of swap meet, and there was a guy who was talking with a seller. He wanted to buy a Saturn, and he asked him, well, what goes in that cartridge slot? And their seller says, oh, I don't know, maybe in Japan they had some games that used it or something. I have no idea what goes in there. And
right.
I thought, oh my goodness, like, you know, So I'm talking about like super deep, hard to discover things like the floppy drive in Virtua Fighter 2, and these guys had no idea what the cartridge slot was for. Like, this is where we're at. And that's just not going to be the case with any of this modern stuff because it's all going to be online. And so I want to get some of that across and be as accurate as possible as well in what I leave behind.
Well, I love Peter's writing, and he's converted. He has turned me on to so many Saturn games that I took a pass on the first time, like Congo. I mean, that's just one example, but I mean, like, his dedication to like sticking with these games and seeing them through and finding the best parts of them, and setting it all in context really helps me enjoy some games that I wouldn't otherwise, and that I really do not only enjoy Congo, but I am interested in Jumping Jack Software. I'm interested. They were one of those early teams, working on games like Gen War and stuff. And they really were like trying to do the best with what they had, which wasn't much, early on, but yeah, it's fascinating. It really is fascinating. Some of these games are just fascinating. And I do feel that Peter, is not only a great gamer, probably much better at playing games than I am, but very much dedicated to that accuracy and that intelligence in your reporting and your writing on things. So definitely has made an impact on my enjoyment of the console. And I very much agree with what you said, Peter, about like, it's crazy like how much we as super fans, like Saturn super fans, take everything for granted. And we just assume that James has told this story about his uncle, what he feels like is 1,000 times, right? But there's still a bunch of people out there who haven't heard it, and probably would get joy out of hearing it, right? And I often get into that. I repeat myself so many times that I just assume everybody knows, right? And then I'll go to something like PRGE, and I'll talk to like sincere people who are very much interested in the Saturn, but they don't know the simplest things about it that I'm just like, I just thought everybody knew that. No, it turns out a lot of people don't know what the cartridge slot is for, and they still think that it's like compatible with Genesis or something like that,
Yeah.
It's all the stuff that we were, thinking 30 years ago. But yeah, no. So, I mean, everything bears repeating always. I think, it's what I've learned is it always bears repeating because it's going to be news to somebody. It's going to be new information to someone. And, we love this console so much. We ate it up back in the day. We tried to squeeze every last ounce of enjoyment that we could with it. And now as we're older, we're interested in the history behind it. Yeah. We're interested in the stories of the people who made the games. And really all that is us trying to squeeze every last ounce of enjoyment out of it. We're finding new ways to do that. We're resurrecting Netlink, and playing Saturn online. We're pushing the darn thing to its very limits, and maybe beyond, with homebrew that like Unreal, getting that to run. We're these hypothetical scenarios that we never thought would be possible, playing Grandia in English. But I mean, yeah, so that's all this is it's like this exploration of how much closer can we get to this thing? How much can we keep it alive, and can we squeeze every last ounce of enjoyment out of this console? We find new ways of doing that, right?
There's a wistful. Go ahead.
No, on you go, Peter.
I was going to say, well, there's a wistfulness about it. I find too, like it's, you marvel at something that's passed on. I mean, I find that the Saturn in particular, when I look at gamers as a whole, this is what we chose to leave behind. We went to the greener pastures that the other guys offered, and we, with our dollars and our pounds and whatever, we chose to leave this behind, and it's so bittersweet.
Yeah.
The more I, especially now at the age that I'm in now, in my 40s, the more I enjoy and get new things out of these old games, the more it's just this pang in your heart that it says, these times, they're just not going to come again. And you were part of it, and it's not something that you can just discuss with gamers. I mean, you'll want to express some weird thing you found in a Panzer game, and the guy you're talking to doesn't know what the cartridge slot is for. So there's a chasm there now, right? So so it's so that wistfulness is part of the experience now for me.
Like this phone has like 100 times more power than the Genesis from Mega Drive, right? But to me, like I could toss this in the garbage. The Mega Drive is this perfect 16-bit computer, with proprietary hardware designed just for it, and the Saturn, same thing, proprietary 32-bit computer with a very, very bizarre chipset that just makes it
eight
completely
processors,
right? Eight
That's
processors,
right.
creamy 3D graphics. But yeah, no, I mean it's just great. It's so proprietary. It's so unique, and computers are nowadays are not like that. Consoles nowadays are not like that. I mean, even the Switch it's just an NVIDIA Tegra slab. It's a tablet, it's like an NVIDIA Tegra tablet.
Yep.
James, you were gonna say something.
No, it's just I think we just come back to what you guys were saying there about that kind of wistfulness and whatnot. But I think as we get older, and what you guys do really well with the kind of the deep diving in the historical stuff and like the interviews with like Sato and things like that you've done as well. Ian Majidi has seminar as well. That we're now getting to pull the curtain back on what was happening, because but back then when we were like teenagers, we didn't care about business decisions. We didn't care about the future of Sega in terms of as a viable business bringing out hardware and whatnot. But now with these translations, with the leaked documents, that as adults we're now getting to peek behind that curtain and see just what the hell was going on. And it's fascinating to think that there was all this kind of turmoil, struggle, but yet with the backdrop of that creativity behind it, that all we cared about was getting disc off the shelf, going home and playing it, reading the manual. But to get to look behind that curtain and see, exactly what was going on, that's what's fascinating for me. And Dave, you said it's about kind of holding on to it that bit longer. And Peter, you're saying about that those days are never coming back. That we're almost kind of, again, that we said at the start it's going to be a midlife crisis podcast, but you're kind of holding on to those times in any way you can. But that's what I love is like the 97 fiscal docs were just mind blowing stuff, like the stuff that long held beliefs that Tom Kalinske resigned because he was so fed up, for example, of what was going on. But in actual fact, he was given a year to fix things and he couldn't. So he was basically told, you need to quit. In other words, he was told to jump before he was pushed. So even now, almost 3 decades on from Saturn, we're still finding out new stuff. And that's what I find fascinating about it all.
I think that, yeah, so I don't mind being the one that says mushy things or gets way too emotional about it. But I think the one thing that we all share is we all have kids, right?
Yeah.
I'm really reaching here, but I'm saying, okay, like we all know what it is to love something a lot, and it's like our kids are gonna grow up and they're gonna get farther and farther away, and I've heard the metaphor, like your kid is like an apple. You want to eat it, seeds and all. You want to hug them. You want to be close to them, but they're going to get farther and farther away. And you're just going to have to be satisfied with the smell of an apple, rather than being able to devour it, because they're going to, Dad, get away from me. You're not cool, or, they have a girlfriend or they have a wife, they have their own kids, and I think that that's the way it is with like the Saturn. It much less so, okay, much less important, but it's also this thing that we kind of love from our childhood, and we're just trying to hold on to that. That might sound a little lame, but I don't think it is. I think it's just the way that we are as humans. We're trying to hold on to it, and we're trying to experience it from every angle that we possibly can. We're older now. I used to play games and like nervously tap my controller while the intro, I was like, what are the True Motion Duck Corporate? I'm just like, what is that? CRI Cryware? I'm just like, okay, whatever. I have no idea what that is or why it's there, but I have to look at it every time I boot up my game. Now I'm just like really fascinated that there were these middleware companies that provided technologies and stuff like that that were just kind of unsung, but we're very much a part of the game and what made it run, or the Windows embedded CE. You'd see that, you wouldn't necessarily know what it meant, but it was there, and it was like this layer of compatibility that would allow folks to port PC games to the Dreamcast and stuff. So all that stuff is really fascinating to me now as an adult. Maybe more pragmatic and like more of a researcher. I'm willing to like go out and find information. We all are, I think. So yeah, those things that we would just kind of curiously like bat away as kids, and we're just like, well, I'm just here to play the game, right? We've played the game a lot, and now we're just like interested in all the ephemera or all of like the the stuff that runs parallel to, the games.
Yeah, I mean, I think for as long as games have been around, though, there's always been interviews with developers, etc. So even though we've not had that much clarity in the past, there's always been that
it's
level.
been there. Yeah. And we just we were younger and we weren't like necessarily paying attention to that stuff, or at least I wasn't. I'm speaking for myself.
I agree.
Subsequently, I mean, I've loved getting, all the next generation issues or Edge if you're in the UK, which were one of those publications that would really focus on industry stuff back in the day,
Yeah, it's like there's a magazine called Mega that I used to get quite a lot. It's a Mega Drive, obviously, magazine. And that had tons of developer interviews. There's some really good stuff in there. And I'd always skip over that. I just want to see the reviews. I want to see the reviews. And then nowadays, I just want to look into like the deep dive stuff. And I think that really augments the whole experience around certain games. And I suppose it depends on the demographic. And to bring it kind of full circle, the reason why we do a lot of this and why we kind of hope that a lot of this kind of gets tapped into by a younger audience and people can take in, we cover a range of topics between all of us, whether it's just reviews or whether it's uncovering news like fan translations, whether it's deep diving developers, uncovering deep mechanics in games that aren't documented anywhere, hopefully for future generations to find these games and discover them, and they can engage with them as much as they need to. And I kind of think is classic gaming almost like, obviously the number of Saturn fans is going to diminish over time,
right?
There's no escaping that, but you're still going to have kind of younger retro enthusiasts, and I hope we do. Is it going to be like classic cars? Is the Sega Saturn like a Rolls Royce that's being restored, etc.?
I often wonder if the Saturn is as approachable as like the Genesis or Mega Drive, because 2D graphics are pretty timeless, but those early rough 3D graphics, while we have a lot of nostalgia for them and we're totally willing to forgive all that stuff, I just don't. I wonder, if Saturn is as approachable of a console to younger audiences as like Sonic the Hedgehog 1 and 2 and 3 on the Genesis. I don't know, that's something I don't really have the answer to, but I see Jesse, my son, engaging a lot with the 16-bit stuff and passing over the 32-bit stuff, save a few things like Shining Force 3 and stuff like that, but I don't know what your experiences are with like your kids.
Yeah, so I was going to say, I mean, my older two, one's 15, one's 12. My eldest was kind of into Sega quite a bit when he was younger. He was the reason why I actually got the Sega Saturn from my mum's a number of years ago. It must have been about a decade ago now. It was there for a couple of years. I brought it in, and I actually set up in his room when he was playing Panzer spy on it.
Okay.
But now he's all in on, he's playing GTA and Call of Duty and all that sort of stuff. But it's my youngest who plays Sega the most with me, albeit she still kind of wants to play Minecraft and stuff. But the one thing that she does love an awful lot is the original House of Dead port for the Sega Saturn. I'm not sure if that's just because it's the just because of the content, because of the gun, holding the gun. And it's quite involved in that way. But whatever it is, but it's.
Yeah,
I'd love, you mentioned about trying to keep your kids close, and that's all you want to do as a parent,
right?
And that sharing games is one way, and I play a lot of modern games with my kids. I wish they'd play more kind of retro games,
right?
And it's kind of that's the sort of thing that I'd love, is for, you know, future generations, and for that love of classic Sega to permeate through, you know, the next generation, the generation after that, and kind of be like, you know, when you see younger generations kind of throw like 50s and 60s themed parties and collecting that sort of memorabilia and all that sort of stuff, you know, I'd love for that scene to exist, and I hope that it does to an extent.
Yeah.
No, my daughter's the same. Like she's 5.5, so like she'll come in the room, and again, like you're saying there, Dave, it's like she if I have Sega Rally on, she'll come in and she'll have a shot, but she gets quite bored of it, like because she's crashing off walls and like she's almost done a lap on desert, and I'd have been so proud of her if she'd actually done that. It's like, never mind what she does at school, she gets a full lap in desert in Sega Rally. I'm like, yes. So
forget about school.
You've managed to complete a lap on desert. But no, she loves like classic Sonic. Like she'll come in to like the room and she'll say, "Daddy, can I play Sega?" And I'm like, she just even like, and I've actually sent Dan like voice clips of her saying it as well, just like because you wouldn't believe that she just walks in and asks to play this kind of stuff, but. Yeah, she loves the classic Sonic. She's like a wee bit of Aladdin as well. Like I think they kind of hooked to the Disney stuff as well.
Right.
No chance of Lion King because it's absolutely solid. She would get completely frustrated with that. But no, it's just it's Sonic. She just loves Sonic. Like I've got my wee Sonic and Tails plushies that sit up on top of my unit.
Yeah.
And like she'll use my chair and climb up. Like Saturn and Dreamcast getting booted out the way to go up and get these plushies down, and I'll just look at my room and I'll just catch her flying along the hall with Sonic and Tails underneath each arm, like you know. So there's, I think it is that kind of wee thing where you kind of hope your kids have that kind of interest in what you're interested in, just like you said, to keep them that bit kind of close, and you're hoping that you can impart a wee bit of the passion you've got for that on them, but. Ultimately, as they get older and they find their own interests, you know, the chances of that waning.
Right.
But I'll try my damnedest to like,
keep plugging away. Yeah.
Come on, play Sonic with your old man.
Like, well, I mean, hopefully she'll look back at that and say those were good memories. You know, good memories with her dad. Yeah, you know, I mean, and also it's because I think we're all convinced that, you know, not just convinced, but convicted that these are good games, like legitimately good games. I don't feel like I'm have to convince people, you know, that these are good games. They stand the test of time, and I think that if you give them a shot, you know, that there's a lot to love there. I got Jesse started on Sonic Jam, you know. I got him started on Sonic by giving him like the really easy mode, you know, on Sonic Jam, just so that he could experience success, you know, and kind of like see how fast Sonic was and everything like that, and enjoy the music. And now he plays, you know, regular mode, and it's all the same to him. It's like he got better is what happened. You know, he got better, and he doesn't realize that I actually had him playing on easy mode, you know, to begin with. You know, if only there was an easy mode on Sega Rally, right?
Yeah.
Because Junie gets really frustrated with the controls. What about you, Peter? Does Patrick play at all with you, or is he interested in any of that stuff?
Do you know the game that the Saturn game that him and I spend the most time on together is Lunacy, Toriko.
Oh, wow.
Of all games, and he calls it, he's 7, he calls it the detective game, and he loves it. And so, you know, we try to find the entrance to the City of the Moons and all the rest of it, and it's just the oddest game for him to sort of bond with me over, I guess, you know, but it's like, you know, we talk about, okay, well, where do we go next? And, oh, yeah, we've already talked to that person. Well, let's go see if we can go this way. So it's just very kind of, you know, it's a one-player game, obviously, so only one of us has the controller, but we just have the best time with it. So, you know,
playing
it's
it
an
together.
odd example, but we're playing it together. Yeah,
that's great.
For sure.
I played Myst like that with Jesse, like a couple years ago when I was at the other house. So he's 10 now. He would have been 7, like same age that Patrick is, you know? And I remember him saying, "Daddy, this is a scary game, you know, Myst on the Saturn." And I was like, "Is it?" I never thought about it like that, but I guess like, so for him it was, and I think I've told you this before, Peter, is that for him it was just like the fear of what could be there but wasn't, you know. It was like you're walking around on an island by yourself, you know, and at any moment something could happen. So he was just always kind of on edge, because some of those environments are a little like eerie or something like that, you know. But yeah, no, I mean, I hadn't played Myst for a long time, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna crack this open and play Myst on the Saturn. And Jesse just happened to like sit there for the whole thing with me. You know, we did it together, and he likes the game, but he still feels like it's scary because you know it was like he was prepared for like Slender Man or something to pop out. You know, but I was like, no, there's nothing like that. It's just. It's just your own imagination that you're afraid of.
Brilliant.
But,
Imagination played such a big part in games back then, though. You know,
it did. Yeah, absolutely. Like, you know,
It had to.
it still does here and there in games, like certain games. Like I'm feeling that with No Man's Sky, for example. Like it is another game that kind of just dumps you in and is like, here you go, explore, do stuff, you know. And you are on an uncharted planet and you don't know whether the creatures are going to kill you or just like run past or whatever. Yeah, so there's a bit of that going on in games today, but it's not as prevalent as it used to be, you know. And I think that's so I don't know if we've articulated what Sega's legacy is still, you know. It's so hard to put a point on it, but
no, it is. But I thought I thought, you know, we're probably coming up to the 2-hour mark now. So I thought I'd round out with one last question. Is
sure,
and I think I probably know the answer from everyone on this, but you know, is Sega doing enough to preserve their own legacy? And we've got the Mega Drive Minis, we've got retro compilations, we have the odd remake, we have the odd retro inspired release. So Sonic Superstars is a good example of a game that harkens back to the original games and may hook younger gamers onto original releases. But are they doing enough, or is it on to creators like ourselves to really spread the word of that legacy and try and get try to get younger fans engaged with what classic Sega was and what we feel is really prime Sega?
I want to hear what Peter has to say about this.
Oh, geez. Okay. Well, so I'm of two minds on this particular topic. So on the one sort of maybe more negative side, I think that specifically with the Saturn, PlayStation, Nintendo 64 generation, licensed properties became much bigger than they ever were before. And that really like we're not going to have a Daytona USA release ever again because Sega's probably not going to want to shell out the money for it. And then beyond examples like that, you could take a racer like Sega Rally, and you know that's a Sega property, so you could re-release that, I suppose, but you'd have to strip out any sort of advertising, or you know that's a Toyota car, so do you have to get that permission again? What about the Castrol, or like there's brands in these games now, right? So that part I think complicates things, and really limits what you can do, and it becomes a money thing and a licensing thing, and so it's a complication. So that's the sort of more pessimistic view of it. But if I look at it more optimistically, I mean, if we look at records, at vinyls, you know, they were the technology at one point. Then obviously they were superseded. There were cassettes, there were CDs, there were whatever. But they've kind of made a comeback. They're sort of a boutique, you know, niche sort of product. And I truly believe that there will come a time where, you know, companies like Sega, Nintendo, whatever, start re-releasing in their original formats on their original consoles. You know, if Sega put out Sonic the Hedgehog on cartridge, 30th anniversary or whatever, some special edition where it's the same game, but you might get slightly updated packaging or whatever, you can't convince me that wouldn't sell, you know? Specifically if it's for its original hardware. So I have a feeling that you know there's a boutique market for that. There is a niche market for that, sufficient enough that it would be financially viable for them to do. And short of us content creators sort of passing along the experiences that we had from when this stuff was current, I think that would be one really cool way, you know, for companies like that to sort of honor their legacies.
You know, that's a fantastic point, and I'd hope something that I've got on my Christmas wish list is the Atari 2600 Plus, which is basically just Atari releasing a full-sized console, obviously updated with modern technology, but it plays all the old 2600 and 7800 cards. I'd hope that that's a success and that Sega follows suit, because I think it was Sticker that said that there's certain games that Sega could just release today, put on the shelves, and they would sell. And hopefully that they do that one day. I mean, you're right, and the license is a pain, but I think that's a great shout for something that Sega could do, which would really ignite the fan base, maybe get some new fans, and it could be a nice little earner for them. What about yourself, Dave? What are your thoughts on the topic?
Yeah, well, I mean, that specifically, what you guys are talking about, I admit I'm a little skeptical or just a little cynical about it. Because I always think that if there's money to be made and they're able to sell credit cards with a game download for the full price, there's going to be very little incentive for them to go back into like physical game publishing, especially carts. That's very expensive. Though, you know, flash memory has gotten cheaper. Chips have gotten cheaper, you know, so it isn't exactly the same landscape as it was back then, when you really like a cart that was like 100 meg or something like that was just like a really big deal, you know? So yeah, I don't know. I mean, you know, like Switch games, even the physical games now are literally just a glorified SD card, right?
Sure.
You know, so just their own proprietary delivery, you know, format. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't really want to speculate about that, but I mean, again, like if Peter is what he's saying could come true, I would absolutely love it. And it is true, you know, like there's a bunch of young kids who are, or I say kids, but I mean, they're like 20, 30 somethings. There are a bunch of different ages of kids that are getting into vinyl collecting and are about that, you know, what I said, like the ceremony of sitting down and listening to music as an activity. You know, maybe you're smoking weed or something like that, or maybe you're, you know, just having friends over. But the fact is, they're listening to music as an activity, not just as something in the background, you know, because you have to be very intentional and deliberate when you're listening to vinyl. You have to, you know, babysit the record and you have to, you know, clean the record and stuff like that. So there's a lot to it. And so if there's a bunch of people that can engage with that now and kind of bring it back, then I guess anything's possible. I mean, I guess it could be possible that there'd be a whole new generation wanting physical media, wanting physical games. And I certainly hope that, you know, that happens. But even if not, I hope that there are generations of kids who, you know, are willing to fix and recap these consoles and keep them alive for the preservation of history, you know, and just remembering what it was like to play video games, because it's so crucial to the history of video games, you know. As far as Sega, are they doing enough? They're doing some. They're not where it's not where I would like them to be, because personally I think that they're really held back by their parent company right now, which is a holdings company, you know. And the holdings company is really just interested in holding IPs and, you know, allowing other powers that be to kind of like do stuff with those IPs, whatever, you know, film companies making Sonic movies because that sells tickets, you know, and that makes them money, you know, putting out endless, you know, Sonic games and stuff like that, which I'm never going to say no to. I love Sonic. I absolutely adore Sonic, but I mean, I would love to see that love kind of spread around a little bit, you know, some more give us some more Streets of Rage. Please give us some more Nights, you know, but let Naoto Oshima, you know, let him really drive that project, you know, there are people that are like still passionate about these franchises, you know. Vector Man, I would love to see a new Vector Man game, but you can't just phone it in, you know, it's freaking Vector Man. You gotta like put some love into it, put some care into it. Sit down and think about like, what is Vector Man? Why was it cool? Like, what made it so cool? Because I thought it was cool, you know, and I would love another. I don't care if it's 2D or 3D, you know, I would just love them to show some love to that. Panzer Dragoon. Let's get a new Panzer Dragoon game. You know how many people would just be crazy about that? Not Crimson Dragon, not something that's obviously totally kind of removed from that world and from that franchise. No, like a legitimate Panzer Dragoon game. That's what I want. But I mean, will Sega give us that? Will Sammy give us that? I don't know. If Nintendo owned Sega, and they had all of these new IPs that they could work with. I think that they might. I think that because Nintendo's a games company, they want to make money, but it's in their DNA. They make games. That's what they do. They're not a holdings company. They make games. And so it's like if they have an IP that's like classic like that, they're going to be like, okay, let's do something with this. I don't know how pie in the sky that is, but I really, really wish that Nintendo would just buy Sega from Sammy, and be like, hey, so we're making the Mario movies. We can continue to make the Sonic movies, but we can make some cool games too.
Yeah, the only thing about Nintendo is sometimes. I mean, we know we just got that new F-Zero 99, but it has been nearly 20 years since the last one. So sometimes I do feel like they sit on it just as much. I would worry about the fan projects as well if Nintendo were in charge.
The F-Zero argument is always a good one. But I think that F-Zero 99 might be a sign of them trying to drum up popularity for it, with a massive audience of new fans, because the fact is F-Zero 99 has brought a bunch of new fans to the series. Yeah. And so now if they release a new F-Zero game, they've got like a built-in audience, So I'm hoping, I'm knocking on wood and hoping that we get a new F-Zero game. But like Peter, I think that I might be done. I may end up making a liar of myself, but I think I might be done with the Switch as like my last physical console. You know what I mean? Because like Peter said, I think the Switch is going to be my last modern console. I don't know, because if the next Nintendo Switch 2 or whatever is digital only, I just don't know. I'm not big on like the eShop downloads and stuff like that, and games that you don't literally own. So yeah, that's where I am, a cranky old man saying get off my lawn, because I want to own these games. I want to have something physical, and I want to be able to go down into a nuclear bunker that has no internet connection and be able to plug in a cart and play a freaking game. I want to be trapped on a desert island and be able to play my games without the internet. Because again, so that's what we were talking about. Like the industry has changed so much. Yeah. And and we can't go back, we can only go forward. I'm just hoping that there's a way forward where, I don't know what I'm trying to say. Yeah. I just know that kids don't have the same relationship with physical media that we do. Maybe the vinyl is a good example is a good, exception to the rule, and I know that some kids are getting into cassettes and stuff like that, but I still think that that's very fringe. It's very niche compared to like all of the kids that we talk about who are playing Roblox and Minecraft and everything online on Steam or whatever,
Yeah. I commend any kids who want to get into cassettes and go through rewinding stuff. I salute those guys.
And again, it isn't about the quality. It's about the analog nature of it. You know what I mean? Because it's like some of these kids are such digital natives that it's almost like they've grown up in this future, this apocalyptic, dystopian future where everything is just. I know that's like super. That's a little much, but it's like everything is digital, everything is intangible, right? So you get something like a cassette player and it's just so foreign to them. They're just like, wow, it's physical, it's flawed, but it's analog, and it's like a mechanical thing, kind of like Sega's old games, like Sega's old arcade games, right? They were all electromechanical. We played some at PRGE. I was like, I have no idea how this works, but there wasn't a single pixel. It was just like, shadows of like little things flying across the screen, almost like sock puppets or something, or like shadow puppets or something like that. It was crazy. I could tell Peter is like, so it's midnight for me. It's 1 a.m. for him. 1:10 in the morning.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to leave it, guys. Thank you so much for your time, and thanks for staying up late for us. It's been an absolute joy to have you both on. It's been an amazing chat. I've loved every minute of it. I know obviously we've had you on before, Dave, but in case anyone living under a rock doesn't know where to find you both, do you want to share, how they can find you?
SEGA-centric.com. You'll find all of my articles of news and stuff like that, and you're going to find like a ton of great editorial. In fact, Peter's been on a roll for Halloween. He's been doing like an article a week about different like kind of spooky or Halloween themed games. Not to mention that he did like a hell of an article on Halloween last year that was like every Halloween and haunted game on the Saturn, all with their own like bespoke little review and score. I want to share that out again, just because it was such a great article. But yeah, you can find us on SEGA-centric.com.
I think we'll put that in the show notes, won't we, James?
Yeah, certainly.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Thanks so much again, listeners, viewers. Hope you've enjoyed the show. If those of you in the Sega Radio Sega Discord, those of you in the comments below, please get in touch. You can also find us on X or Twitter. You can find James at the Segaholic. You can find myself at super_D. But until next time, we will see you on the Sega side.
And you must play Sega Saturn.
You must. Sega!